Now that we've allowed the wizard to create the mapping for us for our dimensional load, we're going to make some quick edits to accommodate some customizations we want to do for the loading for Service Magic. As you see, it uses our SMPWC CD as our source table. And note that in the properties of your source qualifier, there's no source filter applied. A future note, we want to make sure that we think about delta loads of our dimensions, especially the larger dimensions, and that will be applied at the source filter location based on modified date time and the frequency at which we refresh our mappings. The wizard uses a dynamic lookup cache to identify change between the source tables and the target tables. It flags records as new record, changed record, or unchanged record, or three different values of the flag. Passes that flag onto the router, in which the router makes a decision: am I going to insert this record or insert and update the record? Top path identifies inserts, whether it's a brand new record or a new version of a record. The top path will insert that type of record into the target dimension. The bottom path happens when there's an insert of a new version. The bottom path will update the old version with the bookend date, and the wizard uses sysdate as the bookend date for that older version of the dimensional attribute. We can choose to use sysdate or not. In some cases, we may want to choose to use the modified date from the source table as the bookend date for that particular dimensional change, and that can be based on that determinant can be based at design time. The dynamic lookup cache is pretty slick. This functionality in Informatica allows you to dynamically compare your target table, our dimensional table, with our source table, our CD table. It requires a couple minor settings in the Properties tab, which is taken care of by the wizard, so there's no need to make any changes here, unless you do want to apply a source filter to limit the number of records coming in from your lookup table. But typically you want to leave that alone. You set the dynamic lookup cache setting to check that checkbox, and that's about it. That's how you set up the dynamic lookup cache from a properties perspective. In the ports, you'll notice there's a new port that's created by the system called new lookup row. This is the flag that determines what type of record is in the cache. You'll see that PWC ID, which is our surrogate key or primary key in our target table, uses nextval. Nextval comes from our sequence generator and is a sequence generated ID that will be used for our primary key. You'll see that we map SMPWC to SMPWCin, where SMPWCin is the SMPWC ID that's coming from our source qualifier, which maps directly to the PWC ID in our source table, which is our natural key of our source data. You'll see then that we map PWC name to PWC name in, which comes from the description field, alias to alias, and horizontal flag to horizontal flag. At cache load time, the dynamic lookup cache determines, does this record exist in my cache or not? If this record does exist, it compares the fields as we've mapped them here in the ports tab and says, has this record changed? And you get one of three values for your new lookup row. 0 means integration service does not update or insert the row into the cache. 1 means integration service inserts the row into the cache, and 2 means integration service updates the row into cache. So 0 means no change, 1 brand new row, and 2 new version of an existing row. That flag is then passed on to the router, and the router groups help us determine specifically where we want to pass the data. And as you see, the router groups, we have group 1 is insert new and changed rows. So all inserts go out of that particular group. As you can see, if new lookup row is 1 or 2, 1 being brand new row and 2 being a changed dimensional row, then it's true. We pass the inserts out of this row. And also if it's 2, which means it's a change row, we want to pass it out the update change row location as well. And this tells the router, it says, we also want to pass an update for the change record down the update path so we can bookend that previous version with that updated record. So as you can see, we've got the upper path, which is inserts, and the lower path, which is updates, updating on the primary key. Now we do need to make one minor change to our mapping to accommodate for a proper start date on new inserted records. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our flag generated by the dynamic lookup cache, our new lookup row, and we're going to drag that into the expression transformation for the insert path. We're going to use this flag to make a decision on when to use sysdate and when to use a earlier default start date to accommodate new records, new dimensional entries getting inserted into our target dimensional table. So in this case, we're going to put a new formula in that's going to evaluate our new lookup row flag. And what we want to do is we want to set anytime we have a new lookup row, which is when the flag is equal to 1, we want to set the start date to 1/1/1900. And then any other insert, which is going to be inserts for new versions, we're going to have that set to sysdate. This will give us the proper start and end dates for our new records, and we'll be able to accommodate the new versions accordingly. And that's it. That's all the changes you need to make at this point, and we're done.